This is X. St. Anderson, and welcome to the Principal Podcast today. Today, I have the honor of having Dr. Sheila Carrol on our show. She's a board-certified pediatrician. She works with parents who are willing to focus on modifying their own behaviors to ultimately help their children's health. And she's dedicated to helping children achieve their best health, which is so awesome. She's an obesity medical physician, an obesity medicine physician, and just thrilled to have you on the show today, Sheila. Thank you for being here with us. How did you get to this point where you're starting to help, where you want to help parents help their children?
Well, thanks for having me, Xane. I'm so excited to be here too. I got started, well, I've been a pediatrician for about 23 years now, and more recently board certified in obesity medicine. That's kind of something new and newer over the past several years in medicine. But I got interested in helping parents be able to best help their children. I think because I kind of saw where our current medical system might be weak in those areas. For example, pediatricians, we take care of a lot of illnesses, but we're also supposed to do a lot of preventative medicine, education, helping the parents. And, in a 15-minute visit or a 20-minute visit with your doctor once a year, it is impossible to get all of that stuff done. And so I was seeing a lot of my patients who are the kids, I was seeing them struggling because their parents weren't quite sure what the best way to help them would be. And it's hard for parents to get that information. Number one, there's so much conflicting information. And number two, once there's a difference and there's a gap between knowing what to do and then how to actually do it. So the implementation phase. So I transitioned out of my clinical medicine role and now work to coach as a coach for parents, helping kids, especially parents of kids who are struggling with extra weight, learn what they can do as a family to change their health habits to create the lifestyle that is going to lead to optimal health for their child, but also for themselves and their whole family.
Right, I love that. I've heard it said that there's three things that are important when you're trying to teach somebody, and they're example, example, and example. And so my question to you is: so if you're a parent, and maybe you don't have, the greatest lifestyle habits yourself, what do you do to help your children?
So sorry, did you say if you don't have the greatest lifestyle habits yourself? Or if you, yeah. So sometimes there's two things there. Like I have some parents who realize like, oh, I actually could be, tweaking my own lifestyle habits, buffing things up a little bit, improve my own health, and then I can work towards improving my child's health at the same time. And I also have clients who have really wonderful health habits as parents. And usually these are teenagers, they're parents of teenagers, but their teens are potentially making choices that that the parents wished they weren't. And so how do parents in that situation help those kids as well? But you're exactly right that one thing that both of those types of parents have in common is really one of the most powerful ways to help your child is to model the behaviors you want them to see, because we know they're watching everything that we do. I just have one child. I know you have several, but I have one son, Theo. He's 11 years old, and he notices almost everything that I do. And so I'm very conscious about my screen usage. I'm conscious about how I talk, especially I talk about my body or talk about my weight or what I'm eating. And so, there's so much work for parents to do that, their kids will just absorb the downstream benefits of that. And you don't even have to ask your child to do anything or change anything, or it really involve them right away in anything. There's work to be done on the parents themselves.
I love that. So tell us this, what are some things you would tell parents right now to help their kids have this healthy lifestyle? What would you tell them to do, or that's important? What would you tell them to focus on?
Well, I think what we really need to realize is, as parents, the world that we are living in 2023, the food environment that we are living in is not healthy for any of us. And what I mean is, most Americans are eating the standard American diet, they call it, which is also, sad if you put out standard American diet.
Good acronym, thank you.
It's a great acronym, but what,
Mhm.
it's a lot of highly processed, ultra processed foods that are wreaking havoc on our bodies, because, and this is what I love explaining to parents, is our human bodies, we've evolved over millions of years. We weren't designed as human beings to for our bodies to manage the amount of added sugars that are coming in, the amount of dyes, chemicals, additives, all of the things that are part of that make our modern life kind of easier. It's super convenient, sometimes more economical to buy uh, highly processed foods. However, we're certainly seeing in the adult world, and it is trickling down into our kids, that our bodies weren't designed for this metabolically. And metabolically, we are suffering, and more research and data is coming out about the link between metabolic health and mental health, metabolic health and Alzheimer's, metabolic health and heart disease. I mean, just name cancer,
Type 2
so
diabetes, you hear
type 2
often?
diabetes, exactly, yeah. And so when we talk about overweight or carrying extra weight, you know, that that it's the metabolic problems caught, that's kind of a sign of underlying metabolic problems. And it is kind of complicated, but where you store your weight matters. But we are seeing more and more kids, because of the food choices, they're storing their weight in places, it's called visceral adiposity or visceral fat. That's uh, they're causing organ damage in their liver, and leading to problems, insulin resistance, just tons and tons of problems based on the food environment that we are living in. And so
So
I think it's just important for parents to just be aware. Don't I'm not hopeless about it. I don't want to make it seem hopeless, but what it is, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. Now I can figure out what I am going to do about that. And it's empowering, really, once you know what the real problems are.
I love this. And it seems to me that once you know what the real problems are, you as a parent can change that thing. And a lot of times, one of the things I've talked about a lot on this podcast is how your little tiny decisions have this massive effect. So when you're going to the grocery store and you say, okay, I'm walking down and I see this item that I've bought a lot of, and it happens to be a highly processed, it's in a package. Maybe instead of doing that, I can choose something that you would get on just a farm. So instead of saying, I'm going to go buy this highly packaged and it tastes good, and you have to take it out of the wrapper because it was processed in a factory, or I could buy some oranges or some apples or some carrots or some salad or something. Those choices that you make just walking down the grocery aisle actually affect your children's mental health. It affects their long-term health outlook. It affects, just the fact it could affect future relationships, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, heart problems, all these kinds of things. And it's just whether I pick up something on this aisle or something on this aisle, which is a small choice. But perhaps we can make a more conscious choice as we're shopping for the food to say, I'm going to put stuff that's healthy, that's fruits and vegetables or grains or something, rather than that nice packaged thing that's really easy and I can pop it in the microwave, but it's so processed, it's really not helping my family. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. And we have to we have to take that approach that that is really the only way for our health. In my opinion, I don't see us surviving the processed food, environment any better than we already are. And we're not doing well right now with that. The problem for parents is what I was just going to add is like, they often say, my child won't eat that. I'll buy it. It'll go to waste. My child doesn't like that. He won't, he's a picky eater or whatever the word they use. And
Right.
I think that is for sure a problem, but also I think there's understanding that parents could have of potentially why is your child not, why is your child liking, for my son, he loves Doritos. And, I don't buy those very regularly for him. He can have them once in a while, but I understand what's going on in his brain and why he likes those. And so I explained to him, hey, Theo, you love these? They do taste good. They taste amazing to you. They were made in a factory to trigger your brain, dopamine response. So your brain is, when you eat those, your brain's getting an immediate signal like, oh my goodness, this tastes so good. And that is the same signal evolutionarily that has kept humans alive for millions and millions of years. When we would find sweet things, they were good for us because there's nothing sweet in nature that's poisonous. And so our bodies evolved to really like sweet things. The problem is our bodies can handle all the fruit, all the vegetables, most of the complex carbohydrates that out there, but we can't handle the amount of added sugars and extra things that are in our processed foods. So that might not affect my son's choice to eat those Doritos right in that moment. He's 11 years old, and his prefrontal cortex, like the most thinking part of his brain, is not quite fully developed. Well, it's not going to be developed till he's 25 or 26. So we have some years to go, but it's still worth it explaining that to your child, because then they will start to see why they like those foods. And the other side of that coin is, and here's what's happening when you eat an apple or an orange. Yes, there's natural sugar in this fruit, but it's a much lesser amount than the amount you're getting in the Doritos or whatever candy you're eating or whatever other thing you're eating. It's a much lesser amount. So your brain's dopamine response, their pleasure response, is going to be much lower. And so, I think kids can start to understand that over time when we explain it to them that way. And then parents just also have to understand is that, things with sugar taste good to kids. And they might say, well, I don't like to eat apples. I don't like to eat oranges. I don't like fruit. But I think what they're in their minds, they're also comparing the sweetness, the sugar taste of what they usually are experiencing with high processed foods versus natural foods. Your taste buds get used to what you're eating. And so if you are eating sugary food, tons of added sugars, kids are supposed to have at a maximum 25 grams of added sugar per day. If you're under 2 years old, you're supposed to have 0 added sugars. And then 2 to 19, 25 grams, which is about 6 teaspoons if you were to ladle out.
And some kids are getting this in one meal.
Well, one Gatorade has 39 grams of sugar. So
you drink half a Gatorade, you're done.
You're done for the whole day. And
the whole day. Right.
think about breakfast cereals or a donut or a muffin or what your kids are getting at school. So their taste buds are wired for sugar, and their taste buds won't be able to taste the natural sugar in a carrot or a roasted vegetable right now. Your taste buds flip over about every 14 days. So however amount you can cut back on your added sugars, you're kind of improving your ability to taste the natural sugars that are out there.
I like this. I like what you said, Sheila, about, well, first of all, just as a good parenting technique for almost anything, to explain, hey, this is the reason why this could be a good choice, or this may not be as good a choice, in any area of life, but saying, hey, this is what happens when you eat a Dorito. This is what happens when you eat an orange, and explaining why that's a great parenting technique. But let's just say, and let me back up a little bit. I got to tell you, I was raised in a family where we just ate. We were told we get to eat what's on our plate, right? And so in some ways, there was a little bit of pushback. I came from kind of a large family. There's a little bit of pushback. But I actually was grateful for it later on, because I learned to like so many things. And you may say, well, that's kind of harsh. Truthfully, I don't feel that way growing up. I mean, I didn't feel that way. It was just like, this is what we're going to eat. So this is what's for food. I'm not saying that works for every family, and I'm not trying to push that on anybody. But let me ask you this: if a child won't eat something, what is a parent supposed to do in addition to explaining the reasons why? Do you have any other ideas about what a parent could or should do if a kid really just refuses to eat?
Yeah, so there's lots of things. So of course, just like you and me, children, there are going to be things where your child's like, my son does not like zucchini. I've tried it several different ways. He just doesn't like it. And so that's okay. Like, okay, I can give up the zucchini. I'm not going to force him. But I did try it several different ways. And so that's one technique you can try to, if we're just talking vegetables here, that usually is the big thing for parents is, try to roast them or grill them or boil them or have them raw, different sauces, different dips, things like that. And the other thing, there's so many great tips. So what we talk about is exposure to the food, and lots of kids, back when we were kids too, we may not have been willing to eat something right off the bat. We're, also wired to be slightly skeptical of new things. And so it takes multiple exposures. And I guess the data suggests that up to 15 or more exposures to a food before a child could potentially be willing to eat it or be comfortable with it. But exposures can be things like, even talking about it in a way. Okay, what should we have for dinner? Let's talk about what would make up a healthy dinner for us. And then if your child's willing, you could have them go to the grocery store with you. Hey, can you go pick out the eggplants for us? Can you go get some, whatever, get the onions? And just holding that and touching it, that's an exposure to that food. And then if you have time and the bandwidth, to have your kids help you cook, that's another wonderful exposure. Kids are often a lot more willing to eat something that they've had their hand in making. And then, there's so many things. You can put just a small amount. You can put it on the table as a family style and put maybe like a tiny or a micro dose of the vegetable on their plate. That's an exposure. And so I guess the message is just don't give up. You don't have to. The other thing is, my big message, or my big approach is also, we don't want to be making our kids feel pressured like they have to eat something. You have to eat that. It's healthy for you.
This is great.
Huh?
You get to eat it.
Yeah, you get to eat it. Yeah, exactly. It's your
privilege. We can have some eggplant and some onions and some Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
But we sometimes, if you don't take 2 bites of your broccoli, there's no dessert for you, or you don't get to go outside, or you can't be on TV. So sometimes parents, in desperation, trying to get their child to eat more vegetables or eat something, they tie it to a reward or a punishment. That puts a lot of pressure on a child. And so my advice is to just refrain from doing any of that, refrain from commenting, and also refrain from commenting on the good things that you might see. Like if your child does have a few bites of peas or whatever, don't be like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, you are doing, just okay, this is normal, this is what we expect. Of course you're eating the peas. Just normalize having all of these different kinds of foods.
I love that. I was talking to my brother about this whole health thing, and he said, I'm as weak as anybody. If something's in my house and I'm hungry, I want to eat it. So to me, it seems like one of the most important things we can do as parents is make the choices while we're at the grocery store, or before we, better yet, planning beforehand what we're going to get when we go to the grocery store. So I'd like to hear your hands-on, because I'm guessing there's parents that are listening to this podcast who are like, I don't know exactly what goes through your mind when you're going through the grocery store and you're saying, I'm gonna shop for my son or my family this week. What kind of things are you getting? I mean, specifically, what kind of things are you putting in your cart or bringing home from the store?
I am always putting coffee in my cart first. Just joking.
Very good.
I'm totally joking. No, I am really trying to focus on eating real, whole, unprocessed foods and foods without a lot of added sugars. So if I'm buying spaghetti sauce, I am buying a sugar-free kind of spaghetti sauce. If I'm buying,
you're actually looking at the label, you'll pick up the label and see how many
for sure
added sugars on the label.
You have to.
Right.
Yeah. My son likes this barbecue sauce, which, a friend brought over and he just loved it. And it had something like 35 grams of sugar in 2 tablespoons. So there's all of these hidden sugars that we are consuming and our kids are consuming. And so, yes, you have to read the labels. You have to understand what you're looking for. But I shop the perimeter. I'm sure you've heard that idea of shop the perimeter of your grocery store. I am buying eggs. I am buying meat. I am buying chicken. I am buying fish. I'm buying vegetables, fruit. My son is in 5th grade, so he goes to school. So I am planning in advance. Okay, what am I going to be able to pack for snacks for him? And so I do make a list in advance almost all the time, but I tend to buy the same things over and over. I buy.
So whole foods that are not coming out of a factory. So in other words, if it's in a box with a wrapper, maybe it's a little bit of a wait. Let's just think about it. Is that what you're saying?
Or is there a way to kind of recreate that in a healthier version without all of the other things that they add into it, so it can be shelf stable for so long? And of course, I am not perfect at this, and not even perfect. I don't even like that word. It's like I am all just about progress over perfection, because I have stopped buying Doritos, I have to say. And I just don't buy them anymore because, my son's 11, he goes to birthday parties, he's playing Little League, there's the snack shack, they are selling all of that stuff. And I don't
bring it home too. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no need for me. My approach is I am not bringing that home. If he's going to choose to eat that, he can enjoy that outside the house. That's fine, because that at least separates it into a little bit more of a, I don't want to use the word treat or, something, because it's really not a treat, but it's, what I mean. At least it's not it's not usually what we're eating here at home. So, but this is the world that we're living in. I mean, not everybody thinks like I do, obviously, or like you do, or, each of us are individuals. And that's where the work is for the parent, is to figure out, where do you want to come down on this in your life, and what road do you want to take, and and knowing your child, and how are you going to work with your child to get to a healthy spot. It's very individual.
That's interesting. Talking about individual, I'll tell you that was really interesting. We watched as a family this show about sugar and how the negative effects. And my son was like, I don't want to eat sugar anymore because watching the show together. I mean, we were watching the negative effects.
Yeah.
I believe it may have been Fed Up by Katie Couric. I don't know if you've seen
I saw that one. Yeah.
And anyway, he decided he didn't want to go on sugar. And he actually asked me for to kind of bribe him. And it sounds sorry. He says, Dad, will you pay me if I go 6 months without eating sugar? And I said,
Oh, wow.
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah. And I thought it was cool. And well, it's really interesting because my daughter, my other son said, Hey, Dad, they came up to me later. They saw that he'd done this. And I wasn't putting pressure on him at all. They said, Hey, Dad, if I go 6 months without eating sugar, you'll pay me $300. And I said, okay. And so here's the thing. It's really interesting because when there's this kind of a game going on where they won't eat, we'll go to it like a gathering, extended family gathering where there's lots of ice cream and they're so disciplined. They're not,
wow.
And everybody's they're kind of amazed. And I said, well, they kind of asked me if I'd pay them. And I said, yes. And it's because they're going to earn it and they're going to go. And it's kind of been an interesting thing. Even though I guess I am kind of bribing them not to eat sugar, I think they've got good health. So that's a personal approach that may not work with all families, but I'm just telling you, it was one that is actually working in our family.
So interesting.
My kids actually just they'll say, does anybody want ice cream? And they're like, no. And it kind of, I got to tell you, my in-laws, they're kind of like, your kids don't eat sugar. I'm like, well, I didn't pressure my promise.
Yeah,
But it's kind of this fun game that we've played. Which is interesting.
Can I say something about that too? And because in my experience, there is a wide variety of kids and how they are drawn to foods with added sugars. Some kids, sounds like your kids, might be just wired slightly differently. Their hormonal response to sugar, how their brain is interpreting the sugar, they might have less of a pull towards it. And, some kids are, have a lot more pull towards it, even at young ages. So that's why I think, the whole, the topic or the historical approach of well, when people are overweight, it's their own fault, they just eat too much, they don't have any willpower, they're not this blaming and shaming of the person. The truth is, everybody's physiology, how their body is working, is so different, even two kids in the same family. And so some people just tend to store weight more easily than other people. And
I do. I'm one of those people who store weight easier than other people.
But me too. I'm one of 5 kids, and I was overweight when I was a child, around 10 years old, and on and off from there on. And I have 2 siblings who ate the same things that I did and were very lean. And we were all busy. We were all kind of doing the same thing. But so I guess this is the thing for parents. You really have to, with curiosity and compassion and empathy, look at your child's current habits, understand what's going on for them. My son personally is a guy who loves to talk about food. He loves to think about food. And he has friends, other 11-year-old boys, who don't care. They come over, they would eat half of a sandwich or half of something, and they're done. They're out the door. They are just have a very different physiology than my son and lots of kids. So I think that's important for parents to know too.
I think physiology is probably a huge component, and I'm guessing also to the environment you create. So in other words, if at my house there's Doritos everywhere, or there's sugar cereal everywhere, or there's a bunch of snacks that are kind of carby from the manufacturer, that I can actually make the environment can also affect, okay, now I really know I like these things. Whereas if my kids go to the refrigerator and there's some oranges and some apples, and I say, hey, you guys can have oranges or apples anytime you want, instead of some sort of snacky something too. So I think probably the physiology, as you mentioned, is one thing for sure. And there's also the environmental piece, which we as parents can choose what goes in that refrigerator. We can choose what's actually available in the pantry. We can say, hey, these, and I, one of the things I was going to ask you about too, you said something that kind of interested me a little bit before. You said that every 14 days our taste buds flip. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if because of that, if I actually start eating healthier, maybe that healthy food starts to taste better to me.
It does.
And so if your kids don't immediately go onto it, don't despair. Just be patient and keep feeding healthy food, knowing that in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe they'll actually really start to like it after that 15 exposures or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's not, they won't eat it, so they'll never eat it. Maybe I just need to be patient, take the slow game, and let their taste buds change a little bit. And even if I'm a slightly mean parent because of it, because like, yeah, we're going to eat eggplant, even though we may not really love it yet. Because they might decide they like eggplant, even if it takes 2 or 3 weeks. Am I right in saying that?
Totally. Yeah, amazing. And I don't think that's being mean. I think that's being kind. I mean, that is being a leader in your family. That is protecting them. And the other thing,
and I know said that, I meant they might perceive me as, you're right. I agree with you.
Oh, yeah. But I think sometimes parents feel like, oh, I'm being mean. I said, no, we can't have ice cream, or I stopped buying Doritos. I'm like cruel. It's my son used to say like,
that's not cruel. That's protecting. That's protecting that. I love it.
Yeah, well, he was like, I'm going to call child protection, or just joking around because he knows my job. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Go right ahead. You can go. But the other thing that I think is so important, especially if parents, maybe go first and give up sugar themselves or really cut way back. When you do that, you may have a little withdrawal. I know I did when I gave it up. I did feel a little low energy and a headache for a couple of days. But if you can when you get through that and you're on the other side of that, it feels so good. You have so much more energy. And the truth is, you're not hungry. You're much, much less hungry, because it is these highly processed foods that are, spiking our hunger hormones and making our insulin go up and then it comes back down, and then we are needing to eat more frequently. So when you give up a lot of these added sugars, added flours, then you're less hungry and you have more energy, you're sleeping better, you're less brain fog. You just feel so good. You are as a parent, you are going to say, why didn't I do this before?
I love that. And even if there's a little bit of pushback from your children, we're saying, hey, we're going to eat healthy, and these are some good reasons. We talk about it. Why? That is not being a mean parent to say. No. It's being a protective parent. You're saying, I'm protecting you from metabolic disease, from possibly getting type 2 diabetes, or having heart problems, or having, being overweight to the point where it affects you socially in some situations. You know what I'm saying? You're actually protecting your children by saying, hey, we're going to learn to eat healthy, and we may not like it yet, but I think we might be able to like it later. So let's keep doing it, right?
And we can make it fun, and we can make it, simple and sustainable. And yes, it is so protective, because what's coming out more and more in the medical literature is the fact that like I mentioned, that our bodies aren't handling this highly processed added sugars, fructose. We don't have the enzyme to break down fructose very well, and our bodies aren't handling it. That chronic inflammation, it's actually leading to Alzheimer's and cancers down the line. So if somebody gets Alzheimer's in their 60s and 70s, that's not something that started when they were 60 years old. That's not a process. Now we don't think that that's a process that started in old age. It's probably starting, it's gradually accumulating over the decades of your life. And so for me, yes, it's about weight, and I struggled with overweight, and that had a lot of negative, I felt badly about myself, and there's that whole piece of of it. But really, the truth is, even if you have a average weight child or a normal weight child or even a thin child, they shouldn't be eating those highly processed foods either. And
They're
this is for
completely.
all kids and all humans, all families, all of us. Our bodies weren't designed to handle it.
I love that. You know what? Let's talk a little bit about movement, about exercise, about getting. One of the things I've noticed. Well, let me just back up here. I had a friend named Brody who lived in a neighborhood I used to live in, and he said he did this Spartacus workout, and this Spartacus workout, he said it was really, really hard. He goes, I hated it because I hated doing it because I was so sore. But he goes, I'd committed to do it, so I did it. I did it daily. But he goes, it just was awful. I hated doing this workout. But I kept doing it. And he said it was really interesting because right around, and I'm using his words when he said hate, okay, I'm saying because I hate it. But anyway, he said it was really interesting. Right around week 2.5 or 3, something changed. He said, I got to the end of this workout, and he goes, I don't remember the exact date. It was right around week 2.5 or 3. I got to the end of the workout, and instead of just hating it, he goes, I felt like I was just getting started, and I actually wanted to do the workout again. And I think this is really an interesting principle because basically what he did is he led his feelings. In other words, he did not feel like working out,
Right.
but he kept doing it. And then 2.5 or 3 weeks later, somewhere in there, he all of a sudden feels like working out. Now, if we go the opposite direction and say, well, I'm not going to work out until I feel like it, until the feeling just kind of wafts by. I'll just sit on the couch and eat potato chips until I feel like working out. Problem is you probably will never feel like working out, right? And I think one of the things we can do is if we're willing to say, I'm going to be disciplined and do it, even though it's not something I enjoy yet, we'll enjoy it, but also we'll have all these benefits. And if our children can see us doing it, then it'll be like, wow, mom does it, dad does it. Let's go running in the morning, or let's do an aerobic video workout, or let's go do some sit-ups on the couch, or something. And you'll actually feel that the energy that comes, the endorphins that come from it. Tell me your thoughts on that. I'm just curious.
Well, I love what you said, and what your friend Brody was doing was he might not have realized it, but that's what coaching is. That is exactly what you described, that his feelings drove his actions. So for even though, and so what we're talking about with coaching,
How to do the action before he felt like it, and then his feelings actually followed the action as well, right? Like he actually led his feelings with his actions in some ways.
Well,
right?
He might have, it might appear that way, but so this is the thing, when we have a thought, we don't feel anything until we have a thought. Our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings drive our actions. So he might not have been, he must have been having more than one feeling, because something drove him. Because if he was feeling like, I don't want to do this, he wouldn't do it, right? If that was the only feeling he had. So right. He might have been holding that one feeling in one hand, and in the other hand had the feeling of willingness to do it or motivated to do it. So he was having multiple different thoughts going on. I know this is good for me, or I told myself I was going to do this. I'm a person who keeps my word to myself. And so he somehow was creating these thoughts. He somehow was creating these feelings that drove his actions. So this is exactly how you can create your feelings on purpose. Like, how do I want to feel about, we could just even use, how do you want to feel about your child? Well, I want to feel love for my child. Okay, so go backwards. What are the thoughts I need to have that are going to create that feeling of love for my child for me? And if we're talking about health habits, we'll go back to exercise. If I want to go for a walk after dinner, so my action is take a walk, and then what's the feeling I need to take that walk? I need to feel committed to it. or motivated to it. I bet that that's the feeling your friend had, committed, because you said he planned to do it. He was going to do it for however many weeks. And so from a place of committed, then he took the action of doing it. So this is what we do in coaching. Like, how do you, once you know what to eat, how do you actually get yourself to eat it when push comes to shove and your primitive brain, your like caveman brain is offering you, you know what, it'd be so much easier to just get pizza tonight. You know what, just go through the drive-through, it's fine. You have to understand that those thoughts are coming up from your primitive brain. They're optional. They're thought errors. You can look at them like, oh, that's just an error. And then you can think on purpose. I'm going to eat what I planned because I want the result of what that's going to give me. And then you feel committed, and then you follow through on your plan. So this is the power of coaching. And this is why kids can't do this for themselves. This involves your prefrontal cortex. It's the meta skill of being able to think about your own thinking. And kids, like I mentioned before, their prefrontal cortexes aren't fully developed until they're 25 or 26. And this is what people need to actually do what they want to do, but can't seem to get themselves to do.
So interesting. I appreciate you bringing this up. So you're actually a coach, Sheila, is that right? I mean, you coach parents to kind of coach their kids. So you kind of coach the coaches to coach. Is that right? What I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I coach the parents to create, to be how they want to be the parent, to parent on purpose, and to show up for their child how they want to. And that, that is with their relationship with their child. But it's also with their health habits and how they structure that for their family. So it's so powerful. It's so powerful for to help the kids, and the kids aren't even involved. All the work is being done by the parent.
I love that. So you're helping parents help their children. Wow, what a valuable. How can people get a hold of you, Sheila, if they want to?
I think the easiest way is my website. It's my whole name, SheilaCarrolMD.com. And you can email me through there. I'm on Instagram too, Sheila @SheilaCarrolMD.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes for any of those interested in connecting with Sheila, please do. Let me ask you one more question. If there's anything you would leave as just, a really like a good morsel of a tip that you would give a parent, what would you say? I mean, if you could boil it down to like, this is my top tip, or this is my main thing, or, remember this one thing, what would you say?
Well, I guess I would say that your child is always watching you. So be aware, and any little 1% change that you might be willing to make, or really any self-reflection that you might be willing to make, that will benefit your child. So it doesn't have to be huge, sweeping, massive changes all at once, but one little change here, one little change here, one little change there. And with compassion and kindness, this is hard stuff,
right.
And so we want to feel, I always tell my clients, my parents, the first place to start is fully accepting your child for who they are right now. We're not trying to change your health habits so that they're more valuable or more worthy in any way. Your child, just like every other child, just like you, just like me, all of us are 100% worthy right now. We can change our health habits to improve our lives, to grow, to evolve, to be able to enjoy and experience different things in life. But we're not doing it so that we're better or more valuable. And so
it's not about our identity. It's about just helping to create habits that will help us have more energy and better life
experience. And be more of who we really are. And that's what we want our kids to be. We want our kids to really reach their the potential of who they really are. And that's the beauty of being a parent and watching your child grow like that.
I love that. Sheila, Carrol, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. For any of those wanting to reach out to Sheila, look for her in the show notes, and you can visit your website again. Tell us your website one more time.
SheilaCarrollMD.com.
Perfect. Sheila, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Yep, we'll go from there.